So proudly we hail at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting
All right, our guest today is Steve Mihaly, and he's going to talk on unusual political campaign memorabilia. So, Steve, it's all yours. Thank you.
Can we dim the lights a little bit? And while they're doing that, my name is Steve Mihaly. I've been a collector of presidential memorabilia, presidential stuff, for about 55 years now. Yeah, I know, it's nuts. You can say it. I have, I believe, one of the largest privately held collections in the country. Nobody really knows one way or another. So sit back, relax for the next, and I have roughly a collection of 20,000 different items. Yeah, now it's really nuts. So sit back, relax. During the next 10 hours or so, I'm going to take you through all 20,000 pieces. Oftentimes when I speak, the presentation usually goes like 55 minutes or so. So I'm going to chop it in half. I'm going to start not from the very beginning, but I'm going to start midway through today. And I purposely picked this particular campaign to start, which is the early 1950s. This will be Eisenhower, as you can see up on the screen. And the reason I picked that is I thought potentially this might be the first campaign that some of you recall the person being president. And if it isn't, we'll get into the 1960s, 1970s soon enough. So in 1952, it was Eisenhower versus Adlai Stevenson. Eisenhower at the time was by far the most popular person in the country. World War II had recently ended, and both the Republicans and the Democrats wanted Ike to be their candidate. Now, here's an interesting little factoid about Ike. Ike didn't know if he was a Republican or a Democrat. Eisenhower had never voted in his life. Now, at first you sit there and go, well, that sounds pretty weird. And then you go, well, wait a minute. He's a military guy. He's off fighting wars, that sort of things. And you serve at the behest of the commander-in-chief. So he actually had to take a short amount of time off and ask himself, am I a Republican or am I a Democrat? He comes back and he goes, you know what, I think I'm a Republican. The Republicans are thrilled. The Democrats, less so. And maybe some of you might recall that his slogan was, I like Ike. A gentleman early this morning kind of told the story of I like Ike better than I can, but for those of you who don't know this, that slogan was developed by a Pittsburgh marketing company, a company by the name of the A.G. Trimble Company. And if you're a lifelong Pittsburgher, you might remember this place. They were located in the Jenkins Arcade building. And supposedly during the campaign, outside of the Jenkins Arcade building, there would be tables of Eisenhower wares, you know, hundreds of buttons and bumper stickers and posters and that sort of thing. So his slogan was, "I like Ike." It soon morphed into other similar slogans. I like Ike, we like Ike, they like Ike, he likes Ike, she likes Ike. Everybody liked Ike. Now, this presentation is called Marketing the Presidency, and so I'm going to show you some artifacts, some odd things that candidates produced over the years to try and get people like you and I to vote for them. So here's an interesting little piece. You might remember the time when shirts had cuffs on them, or you use cufflinks. So this is what is called a salesman's play it safe set. So let's say you were at an event, maybe something similar to this, or a cocktail party, something like that, and a person comes up to you and says, "Hey, who are you supporting in this election?" And depending on how the conversation went, you could either show a picture of Eisenhower or a picture of Stevenson. The hole in the shoe story. So Adlai Stevenson is out campaigning, and a photographer is down in a pit, and he's taking a picture kind of at an upwards angle, and he takes this particular shot. And as you can see, Stevenson is sitting there, and he has a big hole in his shoe. That picture appears on the front page of virtually every major newspaper, including the Pittsburgh ones, the next day. The Democrats are mortified. Oh my God, our candidate has a big hole in his shoe. So, but they're sitting there going, how in typical political fashion can we spin this? How can we make this to our advantage? So what they start doing is producing buttons and pins with holes in shoes. And what it's supposed to symbolize is Stevenson's a normal guy. He's out there pounding the pavement hard for you. The Republicans take that same image and produce this. Don't let this happen to you. Vote for Ike. Now, like I said, this is a presentation that shows marketing pieces, so I'm going to show you various marketing items. So during this campaign, you could have an I Like Ike keychain. Top image is sunglasses, ruler, bar of soap, and by the way, several of these pieces are up in front of me on the table there, so I do encourage you, if you have the time and you have the interest, come up and take a look at it. So the bar of soap says clean up with Ike. The final piece is sugar cubes, and they distributed these at local restaurants and cafes. This next item is a wrist-worn, wind-up music box. Now, I suspect none of you in this crowd would wear these, but just in case, here's a pair of I Like Ike pantyhose. We now move on to the next election in 1956. You got the same players, Dwight Eisenhower versus Adlai Stevenson. The only thing really that changes in this campaign is Stevenson picks a different running mate, guy by the name of Estes Kefauver, only person in my life I've ever known with the first name of Estes. In terms of marketing pieces, you could have had one of these. This is a kind of a soda jerk hat, maybe something like you'd see at Isley's. And it says, "We like and will stick with Ike and Dick." And Dick, of course, is Dick Nixon. Now, I like anything that is politically incorrect. And this next piece fills the bill on a number of levels. If you produce this next item in today's environment, you'd be stoned to death. It's an I Like Ike ashtray. But more importantly, it's what it says on the ashtray. Youth for Eisenhower. We're actually encouraging smoking to children. And better yet, where is the ashtray from? It's from Allegheny College. And if you don't know where that is, you go about an hour and a half or so up Interstate 79 and you would come into the general area. On the Stevenson side, before he picked Estes Kefauver, he actually approached several who would become well-known people to be his vice president. The first person he approached was actually Hubert Humphrey. Humphrey at the time was the mayor of Minneapolis, Minnesota. Humphrey's a smart guy. He knows Stevenson's going to lose, and he says, thanks, but no thanks. What many people don't realize is the next person he approached was John F. Kennedy. And notice that all of these pieces say John F. Kennedy for vice president. Kennedy is equally smart. He knows Stevenson's going to lose. He has his own political ambitions, and he says, thanks, but no thanks. This will be the first campaign on TV. We now come to the election of 1960. John Kennedy versus Richard Nixon. Kennedy was the candidate of youth. He was a war hero, and he produced little PT boat pins. He was the captain of a PT boat called PT 109, and they produced these little PT boat pins in gold, silver, and bronze. Jackie Kennedy played quite a role in this campaign. The Republicans charged the Democrats that Jack Kennedy's father, Joe Kennedy, was trying to buy the White House for his son, Jack. And that's what the pin on the top is symbolizing. There's the White House, a yard sign, not for sale, elect Nixon. And by the way, don't be a jackass. In terms of marketing pieces, you could have one of these. This was a little click with Dick clicker. Sounded a little bit like crickets. You could have a Nixon belt. For the ladies, you could have a very nice pair, and these are actually pretty heavy, leather Win with Nixon and Lodge earrings. You could open your mail with Nixon. You could go gardening with Nixon. You could play toys with Nixon, a little game, you move the beads around into it. This next piece, maybe some of you might remember, this is a soda bottle stopper. You put the top part down the neck of the bottle, and this bottom piece kind of flips up to seal the bottle. Now, this next item, I'm going to pause for just a second. It's not a presidential piece. It's a piece for Nixon for governor, but it still works. And from time to time, I speak at schools and universities, and always these kids are really, really smart. However, not once in all the years I've done this has one of these children been able to come along and tell me what this is. But looking at this crowd, I suspect someone here does know what it is. Let me get through it, and then once I'm done, raise your hand if you know what it is. So, looks huge on the screen, but it's actually fairly small. I have it in my hand. It's a little plastic piece. It's made of hard plastic. Has Nixon on the side. It's pretty thin. And then it has a little knob at the end of it. Does anybody know what this is? Oh, come on, don't disappoint me.
Is it a duck call?
No, and nobody's ever told me that as well. But that's a great answer. I love that. Excuse me?
I know. We had the dial telephone.
Very good. You get an extra cup of coffee as your prize. This is a rotary telephone dialer. Okay, you would put it in like that. So when I tell the kids this, they look at me like I have 3 heads. And then, of course, they've got to get out their $1,000 iPhones to find out what does a rotary phone look like. In terms of marketing pieces, Nixon drank Canada Dry. Who the heck knew that? Kennedy, of course, wins the election, and soon after, they produce these. These are decks of Kennedy cards. I see Jack, I see Jackie, I see Bobby, I see Teddy, I see Papa Joe. Matter of fact, every card in the deck is a different Kennedy family member or a different member of the Kennedy administration. We still have a few months to go, but Halloween will come up soon enough, and at the time, you could go out as Jack or Jackie Kennedy. Now, this next piece is kind of interesting. I have it up on the table. Early in the Kennedy administration, you had the Cuban Missile Crisis. Russia put nuclear missiles on the island of Cuba, roughly 90 miles off the shores of Florida. The country is freaked out. What does a U.S. game company come out with? Well, they come out with the exciting new party game of bluff. Outguess and outbluff your opponents. That's Nikita Khrushchev on the left-hand side, and of course, Jack Kennedy on the right. The country is so freaked out, you start to see these. I miss Ike. Hell, I even miss Harry. Come back, Truman, all is forgiven. But we know what happened later on in the Kennedy administration, and this is a small statue showing the famed pose of John Jr. as the caisson was going by. Sometimes I'm asked whether Jack Kennedy would have run for a second term. We don't know whether he would have factually one way or another, but what I do know is that they were preparing for him to run for a second term. Here's a small child's bike license plate, and as you can see on there, it says JFK for 1964. Speaking of 1964, his vice president, running mate, Lyndon Johnson, will run, and he's going to run against the guy by the name of Barry Goldwater. Goldwater has a great name for political paraphernalia. And if you split it in two, it's gold water. The chemical symbol for gold is AU, and water, of course, is H2O. So you see all of these items that say AU, H2O. Goldwater was known for his thick, horned rim glasses. So in terms of marketing pieces, gentlemen, you could have a very nice pair of metal, thick, horned rim glass elephant cufflinks. Or Goldwater was from Arizona, so you could have a Barry Goldwater bolo tie. Here's a pin with flakes of gold in water. You could have your very own Barry Goldwater bank. And as we all know, Goldwater was a leader, not a ruler. This is a Barry Goldwater rain bonnet, and you could have been a member of the Barry Goldwater fan club. This next piece is a can of gold water, and yes, the original liquid in the can was gold in color. The other thing that's sort of unique about this is actually the phraseology on here. The right drink for the conservative taste. This will be the first campaign where you hear the terms right or right wing and left wing. So that word right is very purposeful. You could have had the greatest hits of Barry Goldwater. I've never played it, by the way. This next piece is interesting. I need you to use your imagination a little bit. I need you to kind of focus and think of yourself maybe as a young child, 8, 10 years old. We're coming up to a holiday. Maybe it's your birthday, Christmas, something of that nature, and you're hoping to get some presents. And so you come down to the living room area, and lo and behold, there's a couple of gifts for you. You're pretty excited over this, and you unwrap the first one, and you get this. It's a Barry Goldwater doll. How excited would you be? Pretty darn excited, I suspect. Goldwater came along, the Vietnam War is in its infancy. Goldwater came along and essentially said, if you elect me, I'm going to bomb the heck out of Vietnam and we'll win the war and pull out. And his slogan was, in your heart, you know he's right. Well, the slogan and his phrases kind of freaked everybody out, and the Democrats came along and said this, in your heart, you know he's nuts. But however, LBJ escalated the Vietnam War. We now come to the election of 1972, Richard Nixon versus George McGovern. At the time, gas stations actually gave away premiums. Hey, there's a novel concept, don't see that anymore. And so if you filled up 7, 8 gallons of gas, you'd go into the station, they'd ask you who were you supporting. If you said Nixon, you'd get the button on the left, McGovern, the button on the right. In terms of other marketing pieces, you could have a Nixon Zippo lighter, more bolo ties. I suspect there's at least a couple of golfers, I heard a golfing story earlier, in the room. So if you were, you could have a Nixon 4 Nixon golf ball marker. Now this next piece, we always do a little demo with this one, okay? So I need a volunteer. Thank you for volunteering. You don't have to get up, okay? Picture yourself taking your morning shower, and this is staring down at you. This is a Richard Nixon shower head. The water comes streaming out of its mouth, and you attach it to the backside of the nozzle. So having that stare back at you this morning, that would probably have woken you up. And of course, you probably remember the trouble Nixon got into, Watergate, the tapes, so on and so forth. This next marketing piece, this is a Nixon watch with his famous phrase on there, I'm not a crook. The watch is made by a company called the Dirty Time Company, and the watch itself, the hands run backwards. This next piece I have on the table up here. This was produced during the Watergate era. It always looks to me like a toaster, but what it is a small music box. There's Nixon in prison garb, and on the backside you wind it up, and he dances a jig to Happy Days Are Here Again. Next campaign, 1976, Jimmy Carter versus Gerald Ford. Jimmy Carter, of course, is still in the news. It's amazing. I think he's 99 years old. But before he was president, he was governor of Georgia. And before he was governor of Georgia, he was a peanut farmer. So you see all sorts of peanut or peanut-related items. The grin will win. You could have a wind-up Jimmy Carter peanut doll, key ring, knife. You could grow your own peanuts. Anybody out there remember Billy Beer? Oh yeah, that was terrible stuff. Ford described himself as the peanut cruncher, but the public decided Ford was an Edsel. 1980, we have Carter versus Ronald Reagan. And I want you to pay close attention to, on the next slide, the button on the far right, because this is Reagan's national slogan. It's a slogan you might have heard recently. Let's make America great again. Reagan was the Star Wars president, and Reagan had a fond love of jelly beans, specifically Jelly Belly jelly beans. And when he was governor of California, the Jelly Belly company would send him boxes of jelly beans. He literally made the company. And then when he became president, they continued that tradition. And so I have a jar for Reagan that was filled with jelly beans, and it says, "Welcome aboard Marine One." This is probably like a space wrench. These things probably cost like $10,000 a piece. Election of 2000, we have George Bush versus Al Gore. And similar to what I showed you on the Sunoco pins, at the time you could go into a 7-Eleven, get a Slurpee, they'd ask you who you were supporting. If you said Bush, you got the cup on the left, Gore, the cup on the right. This campaign had a lot of celebrity endorsements with it, particularly on the Democratic side. That's Barbara Streisand there. Read my lips, no new Texans, and I refuse to vote for a son of a Bush. But the public decided Gore was a snorer. 2004, George W. will run against John Kerry, and some people in the public were a little bit concerned that Dick Cheney was actually running the country, and George was simply a puppet of Dick Cheney. The Democrats tried to briefly impeach George Bush, and they produced these. These are little tins of impeach mints. And yes, the mints in the tin are peach in flavor. 2008, Barack Obama versus John McCain. John McCain's running mate was a person by the name of Sarah Palin, and a reporter described Sarah Palin as a pit bull with lipstick. So the Republicans started making pins of pit bulls with lipstick. 2012, Barack Obama versus Mitt Romney, and we probably remember the controversy over whether Obama was a naturalized citizen or not. This campaign was really about health care. So if you were a Republican, your catchphrase was repeal and replace Obamacare. However, the Republicans did manage to produce one interesting marketing piece. Excuse me. This is a Mitt Romney oven mitt. Vote Mitt, don't get burned. But if you were a Democrat, you liked Obamacare. 2016, Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton. And Trump's slogan, which was the old Reagan slogan, was "Make America Great Again," and Clinton's was "We can do it." I purposely stopped the presentation with this campaign, and I don't go into 2020 or even the current one. Seems like we're still litigating, to some degree, the 2020 campaign. But I do end it with this final piece. It's neither for Trump or Hillary Clinton, but it's a piece that I really like. And by the way, if you tell me you actually have this at home, it tells me a lot about you. And it is a Bernie Sanders package of marijuana rolling papers. Feel the burn, burn, baby, burn. And so with that, that's the end of our little tour of Political Americana. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if there's any questions, I'll take a stab at it and go from there. Yes, sir, in the back.
I have two questions.
You're only allowed one.
A and B. You have nothing up there about Bill Clinton's campaigns.
Yeah, I purposely skip certain ones because some of the people, it's not so much, you try and look for interesting artifacts one way or another.
And speaking of interesting artifacts, how did you accumulate all those different things? I mean, did you have to go to yard sales or where to find them?
As I said, I've been collecting this stuff for about 55 years, so it's an accumulation over time. How it started was when I was roughly about 10 years old. My parents used to like to go to garage sales and flea markets and antique shops and that sort of thing. And as a 10-year-old, that wasn't something I was terribly crazy over, quite frankly. But I did like U.S. political history as a student. And one day my dad at an antique shop bought a small group of political pins, gave them to me, and it essentially gave me something to do while I'm being dragged around to all these places. Then you start telling people, hey, I collect this stuff. And so people come along and go, you know what, I think I have an old FDR pin sitting in my desk, you can have it. Well, flash forward 50 years, I'm still kind of doing the same thing. So it's everything from the flea markets and antique shops to actually events like this where sometimes folks come along and say, you know, I have some old Kennedy things and I've been hanging on to them and just never knew what to do with them. Yes, sir.
What's your oldest campaign?
So the front part of the presentation we didn't do, like I said, I purposely because of time limitations, but campaign buttons, kind of like I'm wearing a campaign button right now. It cleverly says campaign button on it. But campaign buttons, the type of thing you and I are familiar with, were invented for the campaign of 1896. So that's William McKinley. So what that means is there are no campaign buttons for George Washington or Abraham Lincoln. There are political pieces. There are tokens, there are medals, there are silk ribbons, there are paper pieces, there are china pieces, but there are no buttons prior to 1896. So the oldest buttons in my collection are there, and the oldest piece I have in my collection, I actually have in the case up here, and it's for James Monroe. And he's the 5th president of the United States, so it's about 200 years old. It's a small wooden snuff box. It shows his picture on it, and it says, America for Americans. And it's interesting because even 200 years ago, it says candidates were producing these little trinkets to try and get folks to support and vote for them. Yes, sir.
What's your most controversial piece?
Oh, God, there's so many. I really don't know, but there's lots of pins on there that are probably not appropriate for public discussion. Also depends on how you view a particular candidate or not. So, you know, as I said, I don't even get into the 2020 campaign, so I'm sure certain people in this room might say the most controversial piece I have is anything for Joe Biden, and the other side of the room would say anything I have for Donald Trump.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
With the memorabilia that's being produced, whether it's Republican or Democrat, do the parties have to endorse the manufacturer?
Good question. The answer is no. So you could go out online right now, okay, and type in, you know, campaign buttons for Joe Biden or campaign buttons for Donald Trump, and you'll see lots of manufacturers, and you can buy this stuff online. Yeah, they do not have to endorse it. It's private enterprise.
Were there any items that were supported that they wanted to produce, and for some reason they were nixed and they didn't put them out to the public?
Yeah, there's always pieces, maybe not so much in modern times, but in past times where the items really did have to have the approval of the candidate and/or the committee. And so they might not have liked the image on there. There's several John Kennedy pins, for instance, where he personally approved the image that appeared on the buttons and also nixed certain other designs or images. Yes, sir.
Do the campaigns still use like the pins and most of the stuff that I saw on the screen? I don't think they're contemporary. Did they just stop making pins and buttons?
They when you do see, first off, you see much fewer campaign headquarters than you would have, let's say, 40, 50, 60 years ago. And because of that, you see much fewer buttons with that. Almost all of the money in campaigns these days, surprisingly, goes into media. You know, we're already starting to see some commercials along that. That'll really ramp up, you know, in the coming months. So much less money goes into things like this, and much more money goes into media, whether it be TV, radio, etc. Yeah.
Where do you store all of your artifacts?
If people always ask that, they go, "Oh my God." So most older political pieces are small in size, an inch or less, okay? And so I put them into glass cases, and you can put them in by candidate and put a nice array of 40, 50, 60 pieces in one case, and then you can stack these cases. So in a space, let's say about the size of this cart, I could have about 5,000 pieces. It's not as absurd as you think. Where it gets a little trickier is larger items, posters, banners. So we have a room in our house. It is cleverly called the button room, and it is just one massive display museum of political paraphernalia. So she's cornered me into one room. Yes, sir.
This president took the most interest in designing or creating campaign memorabilia.
I don't know if any of them have, I'm not sure who has personally taken an interest. I can tell you for a fact that several presidential candidates collect their own memorabilia. I have personally met 4 presidents, and I can tell you for a fact that Bill Clinton collects his own stuff, Jimmy Carter collects his own stuff, and if I thought about it, I'm sure I'd come up. There was a candidate by the name of Alf Landon, and he ran 1936. Yeah, you have the Alf Landon button. And I wrote to him as a small kid, and I still have the letter. And he wrote to me, and he said, "I wish I had saved more of my own items from that campaign." And I actually sent him a button or two, and he responded back and said, "Thank you very much," and he was going to keep them and that sort of thing. So I do know there are a variety of people that collect their own stuff. I think these days they probably do it because virtually every president has their own museum. You know, so whether it's them or someone within their staff is accumulating this for their museum. Yes, sir.
When did yard signs start being used?
That's a good question. Let me think about that for a second. I know there were yard signs going back to the 1920s. Okay, so I don't know if that's the start, okay? But I do know there's yard signs going back to the Calvin Coolidge administration. I would think that they probably developed over time as the automobile developed. Yes, sir?
Just a comment, that 200-year-old snuff box, don't you think you should lock up and escape the deposit box?
Well, apparently not, because it's sitting right here in the case. You know, I don't worry about that, honestly, too much. You know, it's hard to figure out what the value is on a lot of political pieces. The value is in the beholder. Yes, sir.
I was going to ask you, what is the most singular, expensive or rare item that you have? Most hard to find.
I have many, many, many one-of-a-kind type of pieces. So we just talked about that snuff box. To the best of my knowledge, that's the only one known in the country. Okay, so there's certain pieces that I particularly like that are personal to me. Whether they're the most valuable or not, I don't know. Yes, sir.
Other people like you?
Let's hope not. Okay. It's truly not like coins or stamps or baseball cards. I estimate at most there's probably 5,000 other collectors, which sounds like a pretty big number, but when you think about it, it really isn't. So there's really no known, there's X number of collectors out there. You just kind of run into them. A lot of the stuff these days sits in museums and things of that nature. Yes, sir?
Have you ever gone to any of these antique sales and got the valuation of value or something?
Oh, the type that you see on TV? No, I've never done that. Yes, sir?
Where's your home base? Your home base in Pittsburgh area?
I live in Gibsonia. Are you looking to break into to take the snuff box? In that case, I live in Sewickley. Yes, sir.
The Lincoln memorabilia,
Yeah.
is that most in demand or becomes available?
It's certainly very highly in demand. It's probably not the rarest, okay, but it is very highly in demand, mainly because of the historical image of Lincoln versus other people in the past. So, for instance, right before Lincoln, the president was Buchanan. Okay, who the heck wants a Buchanan poster, sitting in their dining room? And the answer is probably nobody, except me, But if it came along and said, "Oh, Evan Abraham Lincoln," you'd go, "Oh, that's pretty cool." So it's very highly in demand.
Is there like a collector's magazine or online devoted to these?
There is a loose collectors organization called the APIC, American Political Items Collectors, okay? And they put out a quarterly publication. So not dissimilar to other types of unusual collectibles, there's a loose organization that meets on an occasional basis.
About
Yes.
international, is it similar collectors internationally?
Where there are, it's mainly expats, not too much. So I know of less than 5 that I could think of that collect this stuff and live somewhere else in the world, but they are all ex-U.S. citizens, or maybe they hold dual U.S. citizenship. Yes, sir?
Do you have any artifacts from the independence, like George Wallace and Ross Perot?
Yes, yes. Yes, I collect, all candidates, all campaigns, all that sort of stuff. So I'll give my my advertising speech. If you have something sitting around that you just don't know what to do with, well, now you know the guy to contact. Yes, sir.
Is there a really rare or elusive item that you are on the hunt for?
There are, of course, rare and elusive items. Anything George Washington would be considered rare. Anything Abraham Lincoln would be considered rare. What's interesting from my perspective about this hobby, and I'll compare it to coins as an example. So if you're a coin collector, you can go to a local bookstore and you can buy a book on U.S. coins. And that book will show every single U.S. coin minted to the number. It will say where it was minted, and it will say when it was minted. Okay? So presumably, if you had enough money, you could buy every single U.S. coin ever minted or ever known. The tricky part with political stuff is no one has any idea what was made and in what quantities it was made. There are no records. And for anybody to ever tell you that, they just frankly don't know what they're talking about. So I've been a collector for, like I said, 50 plus years. On a pretty frequent basis, somebody will come up to me, could be at a presentation like this, they brought something, and they'll say, hey, I have something I want to show you. And from time to time, I'll look at them and go, you know, I have never seen that piece before. You know, and the reason being is that every small town, county, state, had the ability to produce their own items. So for the current campaign, it's possible that the local Republican or Democratic club will produce a button or something of that nature that says, Sewickley is for Trump, or Sewickley is for Biden. And let's say they only made 100 of those. Okay? Well, in other parts of the country, you wouldn't even know about it, one way or another. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Does the Smithsonian keep a large collection of this kind of stuff?
I don't want this to sound egotistical. My collection's better in this type of memorabilia. Okay, in terms of buttons and ribbons and that sort of thing. Where the Smithsonian has a distinct edge is they have artifacts directly from the president, okay, that would be related to the campaign. So they have things like the original Lincoln deathbed, or John Kennedy's rocking chair, or, you know, I'm trying to think of, but, you know, things of physical importance. So the Smithsonian, of course, has a phenomenal collection of that kind of thing. Anything else? Yes, sir.
Collection of the President's Library?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
The President's Library, do they have collections of painters?
Yes. Yes, all of the libraries that I've ever visited, and I've been to quite a few, you will always see, you know, artifacts from that particular campaign. And I suspect the peoples in the libraries are still on the lookout to add things to their particular displays. Yes. Yes, sir.
Has there ever been a study as to how effective this kind of advertising was for campaigns? I'm sure the answer is yes. Am I aware of such a study? No. Okay, but they study everything. One story I tell, and it just kind of brings to mind, you know, in earlier part of the presentation that you didn't see. In 1948, there was a guy by the name of Tom Dewey. And he was he ran first against FDR, then he ran a second time against Harry Truman, okay? And Tom Dewey is the last major party candidate to run with facial hair. There has not been another one in the last 75 years. Major party, Democratic Party, Republican Party. And there's a good reason for it. Every 4 years, they come out with various opinion polls, okay? And one of the questions that is always asked, and it was asked in the last 2020 election, is who do you trust more as your president? Do you trust a person with facial hair, or do you trust a person that has a beard or a mustache? Overwhelmingly, even though beards are very popular, these days. Overwhelmingly, the public says we only trust men that are clean shaven. Now, this looks like a pretty clean-shaven group, but I do see a couple of gentlemen, they're hiding at the moment, that do have beards. And so my advice to those gentlemen is this. If you're planning on running for president, you may need to consider shaving, okay? If you're not planning on running for president, there's still time. People are still throwing their hats in the ring. But if you're not planning on running for president, I think you're fine. Keep your beards. Yes, sir.
I had heard that in the Kennedy, I guess Kennedy-Nixon
Yep.
campaign, that was the first one, there was a lot of TV.
Yep.
And Nixon had a 5 o'clock shadow.
Yep.
That really,
Yes, that it is truly believed that tipped the election. That and that's where some of this comes from. That you can still see that debate. You can see clips online. And Nixon didn't shave, and he has very much of a 5 o'clock shadow. And Kennedy looks very clean shaven, looks very youthful, you know, and so on and so forth. And that was a very, very close election. People kind of forget that. It wasn't a runaway at all for Kennedy, but it's believed that something of that nature tipped the election for Kennedy. Yes, sir.
There's a side fact to that, and that's that Nixon refused to have makeup.
Yes, thank you. Yes, that's true. He refused to have makeup, and Kennedy did have makeup. Anything else? Well, thanks for attending today. Like I said, I have some of the stuff up here. If you have any other questions, feel free to come up, and thanks for having me.
Thank you, Steve. Very good.